Millbrook had always been a small town where nothing happened. A tiny dot on the map, it was nestled between rolling hills and dense forests. It was the kind of place where everyone knew each other's business and each other's names. I'd grown up here, left for college, and never planned to return. But last winter, when my grandmother passed away, I found myself back in the place I tried so hard to escape, as she had left me her old Victorian house on Willow Lane. My name is Eliza Bennett. I'm a freelance journalist who specializes in unsolved mysteries and cold cases. Or at least, that's what I tell people. The truth is, I hadn't had a proper assignment in months. An expose on a corrupt small-town police department, my last article, had earned me more enemies than accolades. Returning to Millbrook wasn't just about inheriting a house. It was about hiding. When I first arrived, the house was exactly as I remembered, imposing with its ornate gingerbread trim and weathered blue paint. Inside, everything remained frozen in time, the antique furniture covered in white sheets like ghosts, the faded floral wallpaper, and the persistent smell of old books and lavender. For over 40 years, Grandma had been a librarian, and her love for literature was evident in the towering bookshelves lining nearly every wall. I spent the first few days sorting through decades of accumulated possessions, cleaning, and trying to make the place livable. It was during this process, while clearing out the attic, that I found the box. It was an old, ornately carved wooden chest with intricate floral patterns, hidden beneath piles of forgotten Christmas decorations and moth-eaten blankets. The lock had rusted away, but the chest remained sealed shut as if time itself had fused the lid to its base. I managed to pry it open after some struggle. Inside, carefully wrapped in faded silk, were 7 leather-bound journals, each one a different color: red, blue, green, purple, yellow, orange, and black. On the cover of each, written in elegant gold script, was a name. Emily, Sarah, Rebecca, Violet, Charlotte, Abigail, and Lily. I had no idea who these girls were. As far as I knew, my grandmother had never mentioned them. I picked up the red journal, Emily's, and began to read. April 15, 1972. Today, I arrived at Mrs. Eleanor Bennett's house on Willow Lane. The other girls seem nice enough, though Violet hardly speaks. Mrs. Bennett says we're to call her grandmother, even though none of us are related to her. She says we're her special girls now. I don't know what that means, but the house is beautiful, and the food is better than what they served at the orphanage. I think I might like it here. Orphanage. This was news to me. My grandmother had taken in orphans. I flipped through more pages, skimming entries about daily life at the house, chores, lessons, games in the garden. Everything seemed normal, even idyllic, until I reached an entry from 3 months later. July 20, 1972. Sarah disappeared last night. Grandmother says she's been adopted by a wonderful family and left while we were sleeping so as not to upset us. But Sarah would have said goodbye. She would have. And I heard noises from the basement last night. Scratching sounds. When I asked Grandmother about it this morning, she locked me in the closet for hours. I'm scared. My blood ran cold. I quickly grabbed Sarah's blue journal and flipped to the last entry. July 19, 1972. Grandmother showed me the special room today. She says I'm ready for the final lesson. I don't want to go, but she says all her special girls must complete their education. If I pass the test, I can leave Willow Lane forever. I hope I pass. I dream of a real family, a real home. Grandmother is coming now. I have to hide this journal. If you're reading this, please. The entry ended abruptly, as if Sarah had been interrupted. My hands were shaking as I reached for the next journal, Rebecca's. Her last entry was dated October 3, 1972. Then Violet's, ending January 15, 1973. One by one, each girl had written her final words, and then nothing. Outside, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the attic floor. A branch scraped against the window, making me jump. I hadn't noticed how late it had gotten, I'd been so engrossed in the journals. As darkness fell, the old house seemed to come alive with creaks and groans, as if it were trying to tell me something, as if it were speaking to me. I gathered the journals and headed downstairs to the kitchen. Over a strong cup of coffee, I continued reading, piecing together the story of the 7 orphan girls who had lived with my grandmother in the early 1970s. According to their writings, my grandmother had taken them in one by one, all from the same orphanage, St. Agnes Home for Girls. She homeschooled them, teaching them not just academic subjects, but also what she called the old ways, herbs, rituals, and strange lessons under the full moon. And one by one, they had disappeared. The next morning, I drove to the Millbrook Public Library, where my grandmother had worked until her retirement. The head librarian, Mrs. Pendleton, a woman in her 60s who had worked alongside my grandmother for decades, greeted me warmly. "Eleanor's granddaughter. My, how you've grown. I was so sorry to hear about your grandmother's passing. She was a remarkable woman." "Thank you," I said, settling into a chair across from her desk. "Actually, I'm hoping you might be able to help me with something. I found some journals in the attic belonging to girls who apparently lived with my grandmother in the 70s. Orphans from St. Agnes." Mrs. Pendleton's smile faltered. "Oh, those poor dears. Yes, your grandmother was quite the philanthropist in her day, taking in those girls when nobody else would. Do you remember them?" I asked. "Emily, Sarah, Rebecca, Violet, Charlotte, Abigail, and Lily." Mrs. Pendleton's eyes darted away vaguely. "It was a long time ago. They were troubled girls, as I recall. Difficult backgrounds. Do you know what happened to them?" "According to the journals, they disappeared one by one." "They were adopted, of course," Mrs. Pendleton said quickly. "Too quickly. Your grandmother helped place them with good families. She had connections, you know. All 7 of them? In less than 2 years?" "Yes, well, she was very dedicated to finding them proper homes." Mrs. Pendleton stood abruptly. "I'm sorry, but I have a meeting to attend. Perhaps we can continue this conversation another time." I knew a brush off when I heard one, but I pressed on. "Just one more question. Is St. Agnes still operating? I'd like to check their records." "Oh, no, dear. It burned down in 1975. Terrible tragedy. Nothing left but ashes." With that, she hurried away, leaving me with more questions than answers. My next stop was the town hall, where I hoped to find adoption records or any official documentation of the girls' placements. The clerk, a bored-looking young man, seemed confused by my request. Adoptions in the 70s? That'd be in the county records, but you'd need a court order to access those files. Privacy laws and all that. What about missing persons reports? Were there any filed for young girls in that time period? He looked at me strangely. "You writing a book or something?" "Just researching family history," I lied smoothly. After much cajoling and a $20 bill slipped across the counter, he agreed to check. An hour later, he returned with a single folder. "Nothing on missing girls, but I did find this. Might be related to what you're looking for." Inside was a newspaper clipping from the Millbrook Gazette dated August 1973. "Fire destroys shed on Willow Lane property." The article read, "A shed on the property of local librarian Eliza Bennett was destroyed by fire last night. Fire Chief Robert Miller stated that the blaze was likely caused by faulty wiring. It's fortunate the fire didn't spread to the main house," Miller said. Ms. Bennett was quite shaken by the incident. No injuries were reported. Attached to the clipping was a handwritten note from the responding officer. Resident claims to have been alone at time of fire. No signs of other occupants on property. Strange symbols found carved into remaining shed posts. Possible occult connection. Follow-up needed. But there was no indication of any follow-up investigation. By the time I returned to the house, night had fallen again. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched as I walked up the path to the front door. In the darkness, the old Victorian seemed to loom larger, its windows like eyes following my movement. Inside, I went straight to my grandmother's study, a room I had been avoiding since my arrival. It still smelled of her perfume, a heady mix of lavender and something earthier. The walls were lined with books on every subject imaginable, but one section caught my eye, books on witchcraft, folklore, and ancient rituals. I had always known my grandmother was eccentric with an interest in the occult. But in this new context, seeing her extensive collection sent a chill down my spine. On her desk sat a leather-bound book with no title. I opened it to find my grandmother's handwriting detailing what appeared to be rituals and spells. One page, marked with a pressed flower, was titled The Renewal Ritual. To achieve renewed youth and vitality, one must harness the essence of innocence. 7 vessels are required, each purified through education in the old ways. When the vessel is ready, the transfer must occur during the waxing moon. The vessel's essence is drawn out and consumed, leaving nothing but an empty shell to be discarded. I slammed the book shut, my heart pounding. This couldn't be real. My grandmother couldn't have. No, it was impossible. She was eccentric, yes, but she wasn't a murderer. She couldn't have been. Yet, the journals told a different story. 7 girls taken in and educated, only to disappear one by one. And my grandmother, who had lived well into her 90s with the energy and appearance of a much younger woman, despite being born in 1910. I needed to find proof one way or another. The journals mentioned a special room where the final lesson took place. I needed to find that room. I started in the basement, a place I had avoided during my cleaning. It was damp and musty, filled with old furniture and boxes. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary until I noticed that the stone wall on the far side didn't quite match the rest. The mortar was newer, less weathered. I pressed against the wall, feeling for any give. To my surprise, a section moved inward when I applied pressure, a hidden door. My heart raced as I pushed harder, revealing a narrow passageway beyond. With trembling hands, I turned on my phone's flashlight and stepped through. The passage led to a small circular room with a dirt floor. In the center was a stone altar, its surface stained dark. Around it, 7 wooden posts formed a circle, each carved with strange symbols, the same symbols mentioned in the police report about the shed fire. This wasn't a shed that had burned. It was something else entirely, something my grandmother had rebuilt in secret. On the altar lay a small, ornate dagger and a leather-bound book similar to the one in the study. This one, however, contained names and dates. 7 names I recognized, along with dates that corresponded to their disappearances. Next to each name was a single word, completed. I felt sick. This was really happening. My grandmother, the woman who had baked me cookies and taught me to read, had been kidnapping and murdering young girls for some twisted ritual. As I turned to leave, my flashlight illuminated something I had missed. A wooden chest in the corner, identical to the one I had found in the attic. With dread pooling in my stomach, I approached it. Unlike the attic chest, this one opened easily. Inside were 7 small cloth dolls, each with a lock of hair tied around its neck, a different color for each girl, blonde, red, black, brown. And beneath the dolls, something that made my blood freeze, human bones, small enough to belong to children. I scrambled backward, dropping my phone in my haste. As I fumbled in the darkness, my hand touched something soft and decaying, fabric buried in the dirt floor. I screamed and ran, not stopping until I was out of the basement and at the front door, gasping for air. I needed to call the police. This was evidence of multiple murders. But as I reached for my phone, which I'd managed to grab before fleeing, I hesitated. The murders, if that's what they were, had happened over 50 years ago. My grandmother was dead. What would dredging up this horror accomplish now, other than destroying her memory and scandalizing the town? No, that was wrong thinking. Those girls deserved justice, even decades later. Their families deserved to know what had happened to them. I was about to dial when there was a knock at the door. Through the peephole, I saw Mrs. Pendleton from the library, her face grim in the porch light. "Eliza, I know you're in there. We need to talk." Against my better judgment, I opened the door. "You've been asking questions," she said without preamble. "You found the journals. How do you know about the journals?" "Because I helped your grandmother hide them. After what happened, after Lily. We agreed it was best if nobody ever knew." I stepped back, allowing her to enter. "You knew. All this time, you knew what she did to those girls." Mrs. Pendleton sighed heavily, sinking into an armchair. "You don't understand. None of it was supposed to happen that way. The ritual was supposed to be symbolic, a transfer of youth and vitality through meditation and connection. Your grandmother learned it from her own grandmother, who had practiced it with willing participants. But something went wrong with Emily, the first girl. The transfer became literal. She killed them," I said flatly. "For some sick ritual to make herself younger." "She didn't mean to," Mrs. Pendleton insisted. "But yes, after Emily, she found she couldn't stop. The effects were temporary, you see. She needed to complete the ritual again and again. And you helped her cover it up." "I loved her," Mrs. Pendleton whispered. "We all did. Eleanor was the heart of this town. She protected us, guided us, the things she could do, the healing, the blessings. We needed her. A cult. My grandmother had been the leader of a cult, right here in picturesque Millbrook. Why are you telling me this now?" Mrs. Pendleton's eyes met mine, and for a moment I saw something ancient and hungry in them. "Because the cycle needs to continue. Eleanor chose you as her successor. Why do you think she left you the house? Everything is prepared. The new girls are waiting." "New girls? What are you talking about?" "St. Agnes was rebuilt under a different name. The Sunshine Home for Girls. 7 new vessels, ready for their education." I backed away, reaching for my phone. "You're insane. I'm calling the police." Mrs. Pendleton smiled, a terrible, knowing smile. "The police chief is one of us, dear. As is the mayor, the school principal, and most of the town council. We've been waiting for you. Eleanor promised you would come. I'm nothing like her. I won't do this. You already are like her. Haven't you noticed? The headaches, the vivid dreams, the intuition that's become almost like mind reading. Your grandmother began the transfer before she died. That's why she grew so weak at the end. She gave her power to you, her blood. All you need to do is complete the cycle to fully realize your potential." I had been having headaches and strange dreams since arriving in Millbrook. I'd attributed it to stress and the dust in the old house. But what if? No, this was madness. I wouldn't let them manipulate me. "Get out," I said, my voice shaking. "Get out of my house." Mrs. Pendleton stood, straightening her cardigan. "Think about it, Eliza. The power to heal, to know things beyond normal perception, to live far beyond a normal lifespan. All you have to do is continue what Eleanor started." After she left, I locked every door and window in the house. Then I went back to the journals, reading every entry carefully, looking for anything that might help me understand what I was dealing with. The girls had documented strange lessons, rituals under the full moon, teas that made them see visions, and increasingly disturbing behavior from my grandmother as each girl disappeared. The last journal, Lily's Black Journal, contained the most detailed account. June 10, 1973. I know what happened to the others now. I found the hidden room while grandmother was in town. The altar, the symbols, the dolls with their hair. I understand why she chooses orphans. No one looks for us. No one questions when we disappear. But I won't be next. I've been pretending to drink the tea, storing herbs and making my own protective charms in secret. I think the others tried to fight, too, but they didn't know what they were fighting. I do. I've been studying grandmother's books when she's asleep. I know the counterspell. Tonight, during the new moon, I'll perform it. If you're reading this and I'm gone, know that I tried to stop her. Look for my sign. I've hidden evidence where only someone like us would think to look, asterisk. Someone like us. What did that mean? And what sign had Lily left? I spent the next day searching the house, ignoring knocks at the door and calls from various townspeople inviting me to dinners, events, welcome parties. I knew what they really wanted now. It was in the garden that I finally found something. Behind the rose bushes, partially covered by years of growth, was a small stone marker. Carved into it was a lily. Lily's sign. I dug around it and uncovered a metal box. Inside was a small diary, newer than the journals I'd found, and a vial of dried herbs. The diary belonged to my grandmother, with entries spanning from 1973 to just before her death. I flipped to the first entry. Asterisk June 11, 1973. Lily is gone, but not in the way the others went. She attempted a counterspell during the ritual. There was an explosion of energy that destroyed the shed and nearly killed me. Her body was consumed entirely, but I fear her spirit remains bound to this place. The ritual was incomplete, and now I feel my powers fading faster than ever. I need a new vessel, quickly, asterisk. I continued reading, learning how my grandmother had decided to rebuild her ritual space in the basement, how the town elders had helped cover up the disappearances, and how she had continued her dark work over the decades, using girls from various orphanages and group homes, always those who wouldn't be missed. The most chilling entries were the most recent ones. January 15, 2023. My strength fades daily. The last ritual bought me less time than ever. I fear I've reached the end of what this method can provide. But there is another way. My own blood carries the potential for the greatest vessel of all. Eliza has the gift, though she doesn't know it. I've sent for her. Asterisk February 2, 2023. Eliza refuses to visit. No matter. I've begun the transfer from afar. Each night I send my essence to her through the dreamways. She will feel it as nightmares, headaches, sudden intuitions. By the time she realizes what's happening, it will be too late. When I die, she will be drawn here irresistibly. The house will call to her, and the cycle will begin anew, asterisk. My grandmother had been feeding off vulnerable girls for decades to extend her life, and now she had set me up to continue her legacy, already beginning the process of transferring her power to me without my knowledge or consent. The diary's final entry, dated just a week before her death, read, "The preparations are complete. The new girls are chosen. The town will guide Eliza when I am gone. And if she resists, well, there are ways to convince even the most stubborn minds. After all, the hunger will grow in her, just as it grew in me. She will feed, or she will wither. Those are the only choices." That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the old house made me jump. The headache that had been my constant companion since arriving in Millbrook had intensified to a sharp, stabbing pain behind my eyes, and I was hungry, ravenously, inexplicably hungry, though nothing in the kitchen appealed to me. It was nearing midnight when I heard it. Soft singing coming from the garden. A child's voice, sweet and clear in the darkness. I went to the window and looked out. In the moonlight stood a young girl, perhaps 12 years old, with long dark hair. She wore an old-fashioned dress and was singing a lullaby as she picked flowers. I blinked, and suddenly there were 7 girls in the garden, all in similar dresses, all with different colored hair. They formed a circle holding hands, still singing. In the center of their circle was a dark shape, something growing from the ground like a twisted tree. I ran downstairs and out the back door. The garden was empty, the only movement coming from the rose bushes swaying in the breeze. But the singing continued, now seeming to come from inside the house. Back inside, I followed the sound to the basement door. It was open, though I was certain I had closed and locked it earlier. The singing grew louder as I descended the stairs. The hidden door to the ritual room stood wide open, light spilling out from within. Inside, the 7 girls stood in a circle around the altar. Upon closer inspection, I could see they weren't fully solid. Their forms shimmered and flickered like candle flames. Ghosts. The 7 vessels my grandmother had used and discarded. One of them, a girl with dark hair whom I somehow knew was Lily, stepped forward. "You found my sign," she said, her voice echoing strangely. "We've been waiting for someone to find it for a very long time. What do you want from me?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Freedom," said another girl, Emily, the first victim. "We're bound to this place, to the ritual that took our lives. We can't move on until the cycle is broken." "How do I break it?" Lily gestured to the altar. On it lay my grandmother's diary and the vial of herbs I had found in the garden. "With knowledge and sacrifice. Your grandmother drew power from innocence. To undo what she did, you must give up the power she transferred to you, willingly and completely." "But I don't want her power. I never asked for it." "Yet you have it," said a third girl, Sarah. "It grows in you even now. Soon the hunger will be unbearable. You'll convince yourself that one life is a small price to pay for such power. That's how it begins." I thought of the headaches, the strange intuitions, the knowing hunger that nothing could satisfy. They were right. Something was changing in me. Something that both terrified and tempted me. What do I need to do? Lily approached the altar and pointed to the diary. "The counterspell is there, in your grandmother's own words. She recorded it after my attempt failed, to ensure it could never be used against her. But it requires a vessel of her own blood, you, to willingly surrender the power." I opened the diary to where a ribbon marked a page. The girl Lily nearly succeeded in her attempt to reverse the ritual. "The counterspell requires one of my blood to stand at the altar during the dark of the moon and recite the incantation while burning the 7 herbs of reversal. Had she obtained my blood for the ritual, she might have succeeded in freeing the spirits and unmaking my work. I record this only as a warning to my successor. Guard against such attempts, for they would undo generations of accumulated power." The dark of the moon, a new moon, was tonight. And the vial from the garden contained what I assumed were the 7 herbs of reversal that Lily had prepared 50 years ago. "If I do this," I said slowly, "what happens to me?" The ghosts exchanged glances. "We don't know," Lily admitted. "No one has ever successfully completed the counterspell. You may lose whatever gifts you have. You may weaken. You may even die. The transfer your grandmother began was unnatural. Reversing it could have unpredictable consequences." I thought about what Mrs. Pendleton had said, about the power to heal, to know things, to live for decades beyond a normal lifespan. Part of me, a dark, hungry part one hadn't known existed until now, wanted that power. Craved it. But then I looked at the 7 girls, eternal children trapped in this house of horrors. And I knew I couldn't walk away. Whatever my grandmother had been, whatever she had tried to make me, I wouldn't continue her legacy. "I'll do it," I said firmly. "Tell me what to do." Under Lily's guidance, I prepared for the ritual. I sprinkled the dried herbs from the vial onto the altar and lit them with a match. Then, following the counterspell inscribed in my grandmother's diary, I began to chant in a language I somehow understood despite never having learned it. As I spoke, the air in the room grew thick and heavy. The flames from the burning herbs turned blue, then purple, casting eerie shadows on the walls. The 7 ghosts joined hands around me, their forms becoming more solid. As the ritual progressed, I felt something pulling at me from within, as if my very essence was being drawn out through invisible threads. It hurt, a deep tearing pain that made me want to stop, to run, to save myself. But I continued the chant, my voice growing stronger even as my body weakened. The ghosts began to glow brighter and brighter until they were almost too brilliant to look at. I could feel their joy, their relief, as the bonds that had held them for decades began to break. With the final words of the spell, there was a deafening crack like thunder directly overhead. The blue flames shot upward, engulfing me in cold fire that didn't burn. I felt something tear free from deep inside me, my grandmother's power, her essence, whatever dark gift she had tried to pass on to me. The world went white, then black. I woke to sunlight streaming through the basement windows I hadn't noticed before, now uncovered as if they had been hidden behind the false wall. The ritual room was gone. In its place was an ordinary basement corner with exposed foundation walls and a dirt floor. No altar, no symbols, no evidence of what had occurred. But in the dirt were 7 small indentations, as if 7 small bodies had lain there and recently been removed. I climbed the stairs on shaky legs, feeling both hollowed out and somehow lighter than before. The headache that had plagued me was gone, as was the strange hunger. I felt normal. Human. Outside, the garden was in full bloom, more vibrant than it had been the day before. 7 different flowers had sprung up overnight where nothing had grown before: roses, lilies, violets, daisies, pansies, tulips, and daffodils. I knew without being told that the girls were truly free now, their spirits released from their decades-long imprisonment. But my work wasn't done. There were still the new girls Mrs. Pendleton had mentioned. 7 more potential victims at the renamed orphanage. And there was a town full of people who had protected my grandmother, who had expected me to continue her dark legacy. I packed a bag, gathered the journals and my grandmother's diary as evidence, and loaded everything into my car. Before leaving, I took one last look at the old Victorian house on Willow Lane. In the morning light, it seemed smaller, somehow, less imposing, just an old house with too many secrets. As I drove toward the police station in the next county over, I thought about the choice I had made. I had given up power, immortality, abilities beyond normal human capacity. But I had gained something more important: my humanity, my soul, myself. The journals of 7 lost girls had led me to a truth I never could have imagined. My grandmother had been a monster hiding behind a benevolent facade, and the town of Millbrook had been her accomplice, sacrificing vulnerable children to keep their protector strong. No one had questioned the daughters' disappearances for 50 years, but I had found their journals, heard their voices, and now their story would finally be told. As I crossed the town line, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. In my rearview mirror, I thought I saw 7 small figures standing by the road, waving goodbye. But when I blinked, they were gone, leaving only wildflowers swaying in the breeze where they had stood. Some stories aren't meant to stay buried forever. Some secrets demand to be revealed, no matter how dark, no matter how painful. And sometimes the most important choice we can make is to surrender power rather than abuse it. My name is Eliza Bennett, and this is the story of how I found 7 journals and freed 7 souls. The story of how I learned that my own grandmother was a monster, and how I chose not to become one myself. The truth about the missing daughters of Millbrook would finally come to light, and whatever happened next, I would face it as myself. Just Eliza, no more and no less. That, I decided, was enough.